Hey, Jerome, is there anything else I've forgotten?
Hope sounds good. If everybody can just make sure, if you for some reason accidentally unmute yourself, I will mute you if I catch it. But let's just try to make sure that we keep those microphones off, unless you're one of the speakers, of course.
All right. Well, I think our first person is Reverend Josh Woodrow to introduce our meeting.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Just want to thank you for coming and joining us to this Faith Leaders Press Conference. Like Mike said, I'm Reverend Josh Woodrow with Bridge City Community Church in Chattanooga, and we are a member of Caleb, Chattanoogaans in Action for Love, Equality, and Benevolence here as well. And so I just wanted to start us off by introducing the other faith leaders who are here with us and will be speaking today. From NOAH, we've got Reverend Herbert Lester. He is the pastor of Clark Memorial United Methodist Church in Nashville, as well as Reverend Martha Carroll, a retired Disciples of Christ minister, also located in Nashville. Here in Chattanooga, representing Caleb is Reverend Charlotte Williams of Eastdale Village Community United Methodist Church, as well as myself. And then representing MICAH in Memphis is Reverend Noel Hutchinson, who's a pastor of Kingdom Fellowship Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee. And we represent 3 congregation-based organizations across the state: MICAH, Memphis Interfaith Coalition for Action and Hope; NOAH, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope; and Caleb, Chattanoogaans in Action for Love, Equality, and Benevolence. And all 3 of our groups are organizing ordinary people around political and economic decisions that affect them and giving them a more powerful voice to these issues of justice. And so together we represent 143 congregations, labor unions, and community organizations across the state. And all 3 of our organizations aren't just working together, but we're also part of a national network, the Gamaliel Network, which is made up of 44 other coalitions just like ours. And our organizations have fought for equity in our communities from day one, equity in affordable housing and education, surrounding immigration, criminal justice reform, workforce development, and much more. And this COVID-19 crisis is only making the harsh realities even harsher for our cities, especially for low-income and marginalized people that make up our coalitions and organizations and that we care about as neighbors. And as a matter of fact, just our 3 organizations alone represent 25,000 voters. And so we are speaking here today as part of a coalition that includes Stand Up Nashville, the Central Labor Council, SEIU, and others from across the state of Tennessee. And we want you to know that this is not just Nashville, not just Chattanooga, not just Memphis, but across the entire state of Tennessee. And when all of the groups in the coalition are counted, we represent over 100,000 voters, and our influence goes far beyond our membership. And so thanks again for joining us today.
Good afternoon, family. Thank you so much for joining us. We know that the COVID-19 crisis is indeed unprecedented. We have heard that word over and over and over again. And while the crisis requires unprecedented action from leaders at the state and national level, local governments have a critical role in addressing the unique impacts of the crisis in their own communities. We know that local governments need to have every tool in their toolbox available in this critical time. This is especially true for those impacted by the tornadoes that ripped through Middle Tennessee and the Chattanooga area. We also know what our local communities need to protect everyone's health and society during COVID-19. Things like paid sick leave and access to affordable housing is what we need. We know that local officials are the decision makers who are closest to our communities and the most accountable to the people. They need the freedom as well as the courage to use every available tool to help families to help these families during this crisis. And unfortunately, over the past decade, the state has passed many laws that restrict the ability of the local governments to take action on a wide range of issues, from those that are important to our communities, from worker protection to public health measures. For example, We know that cities in our states are prohibited from guaranteeing sick leave for all workers. That means that leaves many of us with an impossible choice between risking our health and the health of others or facing financial ruin. If we go to the scriptures, we can go to the New Testament book of James, James, the second chapter, the 14th through the 16th verse, which states, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deed? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister who is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it?" In the same way, faith by itself is not accomplished by action, it is dead. And so this scripture bears witness at this moment that it has helped to reveal that as we practice social distance, we must also implement social justice. We too must become word in flesh. And as Dr. King reminded us, only a dry as dust religion prompts a minister to preach about the glories of heaven, but ignore earthly hell. Only a dry as dust religion are interested in the souls of people, but not their bodies. We can't focus on the hereafter just now, but the here and after now. We have to speak against the unfreedom of those who don't have self-determination, those who don't have the ability to speak for themselves, those who says, "Am I human?" Who gets to be whole? Who gets to even to be alive? And with that being said, it is a time that this is what we're calling upon what we need. What we need in the light of this crisis, we are calling on Governor Bill Lee, a man of faith and a man of conviction, to use the emergency powers outlined in the Tennessee Code annotated paragraph 58-107. Governor Bill Lee, we call upon you to suspend only overly restrictive state laws and delegate authority to local elected officials. Governor Lee, a man of conviction, a man of faith, we ask you to allow local officials the freedom to make decisions and take actions necessary to meet the needs in their own communities. We call upon you, Governor Lee, to allow local governments to make sure all employees in their county to have paid sick time, so they don't have to choose between public health and paying their bills. Tennessee Code annotated paragraph 751-1802. We're asking that you do this as a man of faith. And with that, I would like to leave you all, or introduce to you rather, a couple, Star and Mace, a young couple with 3 beautiful children, ages 2, 4, and 8. Star and Mace both work a full-time and a part-time job. They have all of these working these jobs a piece for themselves. They are a local restaurant worker, a local hotel worker, and a truck driver. Mace and Star are the couple that you have to rely upon. Yes, they work hard, but they live from paycheck to paycheck. So a sick day or the opportunity to work from home doesn't exist or apply to them. They don't have that opportunity. They don't have that privilege. They don't have paid sick days. They don't have insurance. They don't have primary care doctors for themselves. They have to use emergency rooms for all of their medical needs. And since schools are closed, they don't have child care. So a day off from work means losing $100 to $200 a week. If they take just a few days off from work, that means that they can lose their jobs. So Mace and Star make the difficult choice of going to work and risking exposure to COVID-19. Staying at home is not an option. It's actually a gamble, but it's necessary. Being sick is a luxury that they can't afford. We owe them a great debt of gratitude to all the frontline workers and the essential workers. And as we say in the Kiswahili word, it's time for Harambe. Let's pull together because we have the power of radical imagination to transform. And that is why we are calling upon Governor Lee to pass sick leave laws. Evidence shows that paid sick time reduces the speed of illnesses and the virus. And if we do nothing, then nothing ever changes. So, Governor Lee, we say unto you, only what you do for Christ will last. My time is up, and I thank you for yours. I now turn it over to my comrade, Reverend Martha Carroll.
Martha, I believe you're on mute.
I apologize. I got caught up in Reverend Williams' comments, but welcome to everyone who's joined us today. Governor Lee, we call on you today to allow local governments to expand the criteria for their property tax freeze program while they confront budget shortfalls caused by social distancing and public health guidelines so that they can protect people who have lost their jobs. I'd like to say a word about this property tax freeze program. It's a great program, and it applies to folks who are 65 and older. But gentrification has changed our neighborhood and most of East Nashville. Still, in Highland Heights, my neighborhood, there are many families, homeowners, who have lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Nashville was already in trouble financially, and NOAA supports the property tax increase that our mayor has proposed. Our city's broke, but the tax increase needs to be fair. Some corporations are paying far less than they should be paying, and that's been the case for many years. At the same time, we don't want to see families penalized who can't afford a big increase in property taxes, especially now when one or both homeowners have lost a job or have been put on furlough. It's not just older folks who are having a difficult time financially. We just don't want to see our neighbors lose their houses because they can't afford increased property taxes. And so we call on our governor to allow local governments to set their own criteria for who gets a property tax exemption. Thank you. And now I'll turn it back over to Reverend Woodrow.
Governor Lee, we call on you today to ensure that immigrant communities feel safe interacting with local health departments as well as other government agencies so that local communities can keep all of their residents safe and healthy. We have an unprecedented pandemic facing us, and yet even an unprecedented event does not change the fact that if you are a Christian, our God sets a precedent of care for the oppressed and the marginalized in our communities. This is highlighted most obviously in the story of Ruth from the Old Testament, but countless other scriptures show preference by God for the marginalized, the under-resourced, and the oppressed. And we know that all too well working here in Chattanooga with one of our member organizations in Caleb, Tennessee United. They are an immigrant and Latinx-based community group that we have been partnering with not just as a church, but as a coalition as well. They have been on the front lines being proactive to not just provide food and resources during the pandemic, but also in light of the recent tornadoes. And from the get-go, we have seen a failure of the government, state government, in providing resources and the tools available to our local municipalities and county seat to provide information relevant and relative to these immigrant communities regarding COVID-19 and the resources available to them. Not only that, but more recently, last week, in the wake of the tornado that hit Chattanooga, Tennessee United and Caleb, as well as Bridge City, reached out to a particularly hard-hit area. And Tennessee United was able to build trust with the residents that they did not feel with any government agency or health organization in order to provide them access to emergency shelter. But more importantly, just this morning, we saw that those same residents were fighting an uphill battle against a predatory landlord who was hoarding supplies and donations made to them on their behalf. And while we're grateful that there's an investigation now going into this behavior made by this landlord, we call on you, Governor Lee, to actually be proactive and positive in your engagement on the state level, instead of just reactive and uncertain when it comes to the immigrant community. And so, citing Tennessee Code annotated 7-68-103, we call on you, Governor Lee, to ensure that immigrant communities feel safe interacting with these local agencies and other government agencies, so that these communities here locally to us in Chattanooga can keep all of our residents safe and healthy. Governor Lee, we also call on you to allow local governments to prioritize the creation of employment opportunities for local residents on public projects, citing Tennessee Code annotated 12-4-117. Reverend Lester.
Reverend Lester, I believe you're muted.
Governor Lee, we also call on you to allow local governments to ensure the businesses they contract with are providing good wages that boost the local economy and provide economic stability to families during this economic downturn created by COVID-19, using the authority given you by Tennessee Code annotated paragraph 50, section 2, number 112. We also call on you, Governor Lee, to allow local governments to make necessary laws to ensure that housing remains affordable and to incentivize and/or require building new affordable housing using your authority under Tennessee Code annotated paragraph 6635-102. The church that I serve in North Nashville, Governor Lee, has made a commitment to working to make affordable housing available. But can you imagine being ordered to shelter in place when you have no shelter? Affordable housing is indeed a great need, and you have the power to address that need. And I now turn this over to Dr. Noel Hutchinson.
Good morning, everyone. Furthermore, Governor Lee, we urge you to use your executive powers to explicitly authorize local municipalities in the following ways. Number one, to make necessary changes to voting rules like automatic voter registration and voting by mail to ensure that everyone can access our democracy in this time of crisis. Given some of the challenges that cause us to maintain social distancing, these steps will allow persons across our state to execute their rights as citizens to vote. It will also enfranchise persons across our state as they now become active in our electoral process as soon as they are legally able. Our president recently voted by mail twice, so why shouldn't every Tennessean have that same right? Number two, to allow municipal courts to suspend eviction proceedings for the duration of this crisis. In addition, we ask you, Governor Lee, to direct emergency funds toward rent and mortgage relief for impacted Tennesseans. Many states have already taken these measures. We know that in Nashville, due to the recent destruction caused by tornadoes, the mayor asked the sheriff's office not to serve eviction notices. However, this is not legislation. So legislation needs to be enacted and to expand statewide. Tennessee has also received federal funding to assist in relief towards this pandemic. We urge that these monies support populations. With over 26 million persons out of work nationwide, these monies could help families directly impacted by COVID-19. 3, to freeze utility shutoffs and evictions, thereby ensuring that every resident is in reality safer at home. Many persons have lost employment, and others have suffered cutback hours, which causes a loss of income. And many, because of their economic status, as you've heard earlier, do not have the option to stay at home. And so this economic challenge creates a scenario in which some need to work instead of staying at home. In Memphis, we are a city with almost 30% of its residents in poverty. And so evictions and utility cutoffs are already a challenge. MICAH has advocated the freezing of eviction and cutoffs, and our local utility, MLGW, has already committed to such a freeze. And now we move to our closing scripture and prayer.
Thank you. Many of you know the story of Jeremiah. He lived in difficult times. He and his people, the people of his city, were sent into exile, and people were disheartened. Everything had changed. The Babylonians had destroyed Jerusalem. Many people had lost their lives. Others had been captured and taken to Babylonian territory. But even there, in the midst of all that chaos and change and despair, Jeremiah said, "But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." We as clergy are called to speak out for the welfare of our cities, and beyond that, our towns and our whole state. And that's why we are here today. In the midst of such a time as this, when so much has changed and so many are filled with desperation and despair, we know there is a way through. Together, we must seek the welfare of our state. Governor, let's be about that important work. Thank you. And now I call on Mike Hodge, who will take questions from the press.
We appreciate all of you being here, and there are a number of press people here, so if you have a question, if you could send it in the chat, we'll read it out and get an answer for you. Let's just pause for a minute and see if we have some questions from the press. Also, I meant to say, I just posted a link about the open letter to the governor that cites some of the specific changes that were mentioned by the clergy just moments ago. So this is something that we're encouraging more people to sign on to, more groups to sign on to. And this is a coalition being led by Stand Up Nashville, as well as other groups. And you can learn more about it by clicking on that link. Here's a question from Kathleen Seary, Fox 17 News. As faith leaders in Tennessee, what are your best recommendations for other faith leaders for when to start church services again? Now, I would like to note that's not something that we're trying to address here, but if any of the clergy have something they want to say, we're happy to let them do that.
I would be willing to say I'm willing to follow the guidelines as outlined by our mayor and by people who, you know, the doctors who understand pandemics and how to make our way back. So I don't think that's a question that can be answered yet.
Our mayor has already pushed our opening to May the 5th, and based upon how he executed his stay-at-home orders, which, by the way, were executed before the state did, he will probably push it back even more. We're just not ready. And there are some clergy out of Memphis who have already advocated that we not open up the state at this time, since we have not hit the crest of COVID-19 situations as of yet.
Let me go on then to the next question. Let's see, this is from Michaela Watts with the Commercial Appeal for Reverend Woodrow. In addition to a general distrust of government services in immigrant communities, are immigrant communities even able to access reliable information in Spanish from health departments?
Yeah, from our partners here on the ground and what we've experienced, it's taken the proactive approach of community organizations like Caleb, Tennessee United, and Bridge City to make the information available because it's not widely disseminated from the government agencies themselves. And so we've had to take the initial action in order to actually disseminate that information. And because of that, it was even delayed. Once all the initial stuff started hitting the news and access to resources being publicized, it was a catch-up game for our local groups in order to actually get reliable and accessible information out to our immigrant communities.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the press? If any of the press, any of the media outlets want contact information for any of these clergy people, if you would just email me, or this is Mike Hodge. You can email me at, I'll put my email address in the chat, and you could email me and I can get you contact information of them if you'd like to talk to them directly. Okay, I think Kathleen Siri had one more question. Okay, Kathleen, I don't see it right now. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, this is Michaela. I wasn't able to get my question in chat up fast enough. I hope it's okay that I'm breaking into
Jump in.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this coalition of coalitions if any communication with Governor Lee's office has already occurred, or have you guys been able to initiate any conversations with his administration?
I see we have Odessa Kelly on the chat, on the conference here, and Odessa is the executive director of Stand Up Nashville. I think Odessa might know about that.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Mike. Great press conference. Thank you to all the clergy and faith leaders for coming on and speaking. To the individual just asked the question, yes, we have reached out by email. We've sent countless of emails to the governor and to his staff. I sent one personally to him and the rest of his staff, trying to get a response. I haven't heard anything. Made 2 phone calls myself, and haven't received any contact back yet. So, I don't want to make any assumptions of why we haven't gotten a call back. We know that we assume that anyone in a position of leadership is extremely busy at this time, but we also think that this is urgent as well. As you know, NOAA, Stand Up Nashville, Memphis for All, and everyone else who's a part of this coalition, Caleb, MICAH, and so many other groups across the state of Tennessee, rural communities, along with the big city communities, have come together to say that this is something that's needed. This is a time not to be thinking of what we usually have as surface issues and claiming territory, but knowing that, how hard is it to allow people to have sick and pay leave so they can do what's best by their neighbors and their communities.
Just as a follow-up to that, we know that people in this coalition and others across the state have been emailing the governor asking for action on this. And I've just posted a link in the chat that would let any of you all that are on here now email the governor. You can click on it and it will take you to a site where you can fill in your information. And then there's a sample letter, but it's open to be altered by you because we want it to be something that is really from you and from your heart. Any other questions? All right, let's see. We've got a couple of minutes to take some questions from anyone on the call at all. I see that where'd you go? Natasha Dean asked a question here. If I can find, there it is. Natasha Dean asked the clergy, do church staff members get guaranteed sick leave? That's a good question. If so, then that would make it more practical for churches to be open. Do we have any answers to that?
Well, the staff at the church I serve do certainly get sick leave, but we're not looking at opening anytime soon until 4 criteria at least have been met. That's extensive testing, follow-up on contacts, the providing of emergency equipment for both hospitals and first responders, and people wearing masks when 6 feet distancing cannot be maintained. And until we as a nation are doing that, we're not prepared to open anything. And opening anything prior to that is premature.
And let me add to what Reverend Lester has said. Ours is a small church, and so sick leave is not really an issue with us. But let me also say this. It has been proven across the length and breadth of this country that open worship services have been incubators to spread this pandemic. And so it is not the time, regardless of sick leave or whatever, to open up our houses of worship to help spread this pandemic.
Okay, I've got one more question from Kathleen Seary. She says, as faith leaders, could you explain in general why it's so important to advocate for your communities by asking Governor Lee to take this action? Who would like to take that?
I'll step in real quick. I would encourage you to refer to the scriptures that were read at the beginning and at the end of our press conference, because they summate the fact that, first of all, churches operate in community. And they operate in the community of Christian witness, and then they operate in the overall community. And especially Jeremiah 29, it says, seek the peace of the city where you live. And so how could we advocate for God and not also advocate for the communities in which we live?
And to just add to what Dr. Hutchinson has said, many of those in public life who claim to pray, that's P-R-A-Y, really pray, P-R-E-Y, on those who are vulnerable and least able to defend themselves. And Micah 6:8 is a profound passage to add to the others we've looked at. He has shown you, a man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Governor Lee claims to be a person of faith. We'd like to see him put his authority as governor where he claims to lead.
All right.
I would like to just speak to the practical matter here. I appreciate the comments that my colleagues have made, but we just strongly feel that communities can make best decisions because they know their community better. And so we're asking for the freedom to allow leaders within any city or town or county to make their own decisions. We've passed some things here in Nashville that have been undone by the state legislators. It went against what people in Nashville supported, and we just like to see Nashville be able to make its own decisions about some of these matters.
And all of those things were mentioned in the open letter that the link is in the chat. Any other questions? Yes, Odessa.
I just want to say to anyone and everyone who's out here watching and looking to press as well. Channel 2, Channel 5, 4, NPR. This is affecting you the same way that it's affecting us. And we know that you have opinions about it. Due to professionalism, we know that you can't take a stance one way or another. But this COVID-19 is a situation that supersedes anything else that we've been in, you know? So I'm going to ask you that you help reach out to other clergy members in rural counties, because we know that they're feeling the same way. We just might have a lack of access of getting contact to them. We want to hear what they think about this. Where do they feel about the role that faith should be playing in how we best take care of our communities. Thanks to all the clergy who are on the call right now, but I also want to challenge other clergy members, other faith members to, not only sign on to the letter that we have if you believe in that, but to also just speak up and reach out to Governor Lee to let him know that this is a time where we cannot be partisan. We cannot put business in front of the good health and well-being of people. And this is a time where we just all have to just take our time and do what's best to keep everyone healthy.
Okay, thank you, Odessa. I did want to note also, I'm putting in the chat box information about an online town hall that's on Monday at 6 o'clock Central Time. It's called Our Community, Our Decisions, Local Democracy, and COVID-19. And this will be a time when you'll hear more about these issues, the things that are being asked of the governor, but also there'll be testimony from different workers and others who are experiencing these things personally themselves. Any last questions before we adjourn? Just want to thank all of you. Thanks very, very much to our clergy and also to the rest of you. Thank you to the media. If you want any kind of follow-up, please email me. And this concludes the press conference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.